Every great shot is underpinned by good body mechanics. And yeah, that's true even for acting. Body mechanics is under the hood driving all the gestures. And this also means that every great shot is giving you clues on how to level up, to be ready for those acting pieces if your body mechanics aren't there. So they're giving you clues on how to move your characters more believably, and they're giving you clues on how to finally make the animations then that would amaze people to get you hired. The challenge is, of course, finding those clues. If you're anything like I was as a student, those great shots either had you so focused on the entertainment that you forgot the mechanics were even there because they were that good, or they boggle your mind and with how much is going on, and it's tough to figure out, right? I think we all go through that. So today we're going to look at some great shots, and I'm going to point out a bunch of these clues to you to help you out. And you can use these clues and insights like a checklist for every shot that you're going to do going forward. The idea is that it will help you quickly find what's missing in your own mechanics to raise your art to a new level. And it'll be especially helpful if you've already been following my strategy that I outlined in the How to Get Hireable Animation Skills Fast tutorial. As we dive in, I want you to keep in mind two things. One, your animations don't have to match these pro shots quality to get you hired, right? In fact, their level should be much higher than you just because they've got way more experience. So the goal here is to highlight what in your mechanics could use a level up. And that's pretty much it. And that should be, just working on a few of those things should get your shots to a more hireable level. The second thing is each awesome animation we're going to look at has a ton of basic and advanced body mechanic insights. We won't have time to cover them all, so I'm going to focus on the 4 really critical ones that I see dragging a lot of students down, and we're going to begin there. First up, holds and settles. Loads of students struggle with holding or settling a character's movement in a natural way. Or what's worse is that they don't even think about adding it into their animation in the first place. This leads to a ton of movements feeling really clunky and harsh. When you watch great shots, there's a natural fall off to every move and natural pauses in the action. In Tangled, I love this settle. You can really feel in the hips how that motion is fairly consistent through here. There's a good amount of energy in the move to step onto the staircase to swing forward. We feel the arc going forward, up, coming down, and then as it goes down, rocking forward again to a stop. Right here, we feel this this energy die off right there, starting with the hip, and then of course it's also in the spine. And really the last few things to settle is going to be the hair, the cloth, just because that stuff's very light and draggy. With Medusa here, there's a slightly different kind of settle, just because the movement itself is a little bit different. So as she's shaking her head here, you can feel the head shakes getting smaller and smaller, just as she's kind of finishing her line. Medusa's pawn shop boutique, right, where she kicks her head back and forth, and then it's just kind of fading out right here. Just as a great way to go right into your hold that happens after this, where she's pausing, right? So there's that nice tapering off of energy, just mainly with this head shake motion that's happening. We have another nice settle here as she slides up the wall and then drops down onto her hips, and it's finishing with a bit of a twist here in that hip. So the vertical movement kind of slows down almost to nothing, and then there's just a little bit of extra twist on top of that to keep things alive. And the other way that it kind of continues is that as her body stops, then her eyes kick in. So all these different examples for settles should give you, a lot of ideas on how motion can taper off, how that energy can slow down, come to a crawl, and get you into a hold in a very smooth way. Whether that means, like in this case, that the hip is the primary driver, and like once that hip comes down and stops, and then everything follows through and kind of slows down. That's how you can settle a character. That's one way how you can settle a character, using gravity and just kind of sinking into a down position. That's a very common way to do it. It doesn't take a lot of energy in real life for us to do something like that. Then you had the case with Medusa where she's shaking her head, and that's kind of tapering off as she finishes her line. So you can taper off and settle movements that way. Number 2, strong spacing. Spacing is basic, but student animators mess it up constantly. So it really must be mentioned anytime there's a discussion on body mechanics. When you look at great shots, the spacing is phenomenal for every move on every body part. If it wasn't, the movements would be feeling very floaty, very soft. They would feel like they're on the moon. We wouldn't buy that these characters are living, breathing in this fake real world, right? And we definitely wouldn't, be able to focus on how they're feeling at any given time. It wouldn't be very clear. So strong spacing is how you create good weight, snap, and fluidity in your animation. Back in this Coco sequence here, the security guard is easily overlooked for the mechanics, but his mechanics are great. For the moves that he does. That hand swipe across the table feels very sharp and snappy, and that is because of the spacing. So if we look at that spacing, one thing we notice is that the spacing really favors this end, and there's a nice ease out to pick up speed through the middle, and then it eases in over here. Okay, so the spacing is very sharp, favoring the extremes, so that we really feel that speed up as it swipes by. He's got that attitude to it where he's, no funny business. The other thing that you might note from this movement is as that spacing finishes, it overshoots and comes back into a settle. So that just kind of ties back into what we were just talking about. And then in the beginning, to really help us see that this motion is going to happen and to have him build up some energy to go this way, he first anticipates in the tiniest little bit screen right before he makes that swipe across. And then when Hector goes to lean back in the chair, his head spacing has a similar deal. So all the spine overlap that he has, the whole spine working really well. And then we can feel, it's not as dramatic as the security guard's hand swipe across the table, but we can feel that spacing get closer together as it gets towards the settle. So we can feel really that slow down. And again, he's overshooting here to settle that motion. So that's why it kind of goes over and then comes back. Right, so if we look at the ghosting on that, there's a bunch of frames, right? But if you see where the motion started, spacing wise, it's much closer together through here, and then we can feel that slight speed up as he goes back and away from camera. And this more extreme example with the action that happens to Woody here, something that's very body mechanics intense. I love what happens, spacing wise with these feet here. So they kind of fast out. There's not a whole lot of ease. There's still quite a bit, and then he suddenly just slips here with this foot, and he's off to the races. Especially with this guy. So try to track that one through the motion blur. And we can see as it comes up, and that gravity effect is kicking in, that spacing gets closer together. So we can really read, even though here he's kind of picking up speed quickly, you know, that spacing is closer together, and then it gets a lot more spread out right through the middle, like a pendulum would, and then tightens up, you know, at the extreme ends before, you know, it swings down again, and these kind of switch places, these legs, right? So this leg is also fast through the middle. Right, and then it's kind of slowing down through here. All right, so very fun stuff. But it really, you know, having all the spacing considered, and it's not just for the legs, it's for everything. You know, the arms, the head, the legs, the hip, all that stuff. Having it very well crafted gives just the right amount of intensity to each move, allows the audience, whoever's watching, to clearly see what you want them to see and not have it be flickery or too slow and floaty. It really grounds them in the scene, makes them feel like they're living in a real world with gravity, and lets us, you know, really feel their emotions. And this strong spacing is, you know, really tied closely to what we're going to talk about next. Number 3, a connected body. When characters move, it should always feel like their entire body is connected. Great shots nail this. An arm move, you know, that happens will pull the torso. A head turn will probably twist the torso with it. Or the body, you know, might go first and then everything else drags behind, right? You get kind of that wavy motion. Point is that no body part feels completely isolated from any move. You can also see how great animators connect the body by using every rotation. For example, if there's movement in the hips, it won't just, you know, like twist. There'll also be like a bend, a tilt happening at the same time, making both those shapes and movements more dynamic, because, well, we live in a 3D world. Our bodies are you know, have 3 dimensions to it, and we move that way. When Woody steps up onto this toilet seat and then climbs up onto the top, we see a lot of that interconnectedness and the rotations of the hip. Let me point them out. So here, as he's coming up, we see the hip is tilted to say this way, right? And then as you know, this foot finishes coming up, we see that kick over, lifting on this side because this foot is so much higher, right? And this one's dangling down, not holding the weight. So, you know, we get that interconnectedness with the legs and the hip, and then we also get the hip, you know, paying attention to some tilting, and it goes even further to this extra here. And as we go forward through the shot too, we can see that tilt comes back again, and it's very subtle, but there is some twisting happening with that hip as well, and swinging those legs. And we also see a more extreme example in terms of the tilting changes, paying attention to the tilting and the twisting here. So as he goes up to get to the top of the toilet here, and he's making that turn, we see that weight go down on this side, and that tilt changes, and then the hip is twisting this way to pull this leg forward and up, and it's going high on this side because that foot needs to go up here. So all the rotations are being considered in the hip for sure, and that just continues on throughout the rest of the shot for all these leg swings. Back to our security guard here. Aside from the hand spacing that we saw where he swipes across a desk, there is a really nice move in the body as well that is connected to that hand move. Builds on top of it, right? Makes for better mechanics. So when this hand swipes across the force of that, actually, you can see right here, is shifting the body, the torso screen right. Okay, head goes 2. The body really is what starts to move first. We see more motion in it here. The head's fairly like dragging behind still. And then what ends up happening is the head here makes a big change in that spacing. So it's getting affected in the end the most by that hand. So the body moves a little bit and then it kind of settles around here. And then the head just kind of darts over after that, a couple of frames after the fastest motion with that hand. So it ends up making the body feel really connected to that move and making it feel, subtly powerful of a swipe. Like it's got a little bit of attitude because it gave the body a little bit of a kick out of it too. Subtle, awesome stuff. Medusa here does some cool stuff. She anticipates forward here, which, is helping the action, very clear line of action through the body. Where the connectedness really comes into play here for me that I like is as she starts to go back. It's not just a linear move straight back with just a bend from like this position to that position or anything. As she goes back, yes, the shape is compressing for that overlap here, and she's got that drag in the spine, but there's that connectedness coming into play with the twist that's happening in her body right here. She's twisting this way with the head and some with the chest, right, as she pulls back, and then she opens up to camera twisting the other way here with her chest, neck, and head, as she's doing the head shake, laughing. And if we keep going forward back to that section where we talked about a hold here, when she brings that foot down and starts to relax the body. If we just play through this section, it's a little harder to spot here in 2D, just because we're not getting as much details, as you see in the modern day animated 3D movies, but with all the lighting and stuff. But here, as she comes forward, you can feel just by watching the lines here and the shoulder line and everything that she's kind of twisting away, especially with her head. And especially here, she just keeps going that direction a little bit and then rocks back. So there's that interconnectedness happening in this move where it's not just the one rotation. And Milt, obviously he knows what he's doing, so he found a way to add all kinds of dynamic motion to this movement so that you really feel what Medusa feels. All of this is extremely overlooked by students. Poses usually start out symmetrical with only one rotation used for like the chest and hips. So the side view body will might be curled in like this, have a nice curve to it, a nice line of action. But then from the front view, the characters are almost like T-pose, like rigid, stiff, and that usually cascades into the movement. It continues the trend. So when the movement begins, students will just use, say, rotate X to bend the chest in, and they won't consider anything else. So what it does is it ends up making all of your movements feel very linear and robotic, like you're doing one move at a time, which obviously is pretty unnatural. And this leads pretty nicely into our last big insight. So number 4, rolling spines. We naturally move in arcs, right? As we're on a planet with gravity and we're not made of metal. The spine is no exception to this, yet students typically add only spine overlap in the one rotation, kind of like I was just talking about with like the poses and that kind of carrying over. It's the same thing here, but especially with the spine. They'll might catch it for the limbs, but not for the core of the body. And I get why this happens. It's because, you have to manage 3 or 4 different spine controllers compared to like one other thing. So it's much harder. And when you're using a 3D rig, it's also easy to just get focused on doing like rotate X only for right now, and then you forget, to arc the body. You might be having such a hard time with overlap that that it's really hard for you to get control over it too. What this does ultimately is it creates linear arcs for the head and the torso in general. So the body tends to come back like this and then over, and then, instead of doing some kind of roll, with these moves. And it doesn't always have to be a big move. It can be, something more subtle. But that really makes it feel a lot more natural. Remember when we talked about Hector leaning back in this chair here and the spacing that he has and how good that settle is? There's also a nice rolling spine action happening here as he goes back. I can really feel him, really rounding. If we were looking at this from above, looking down, you can really feel his arc going out and around with that head if you're just watching that motion. And then it comes over. So it's a simple thing to have in there, but it's so common to not see this in student animations. Instead, you'll just get like this linear move straight back, as opposed to that kind of arc in there. So that's more of like a subtle roll that you could totally put into your movements wherever it's appropriate. Of course, Milt has put this into Medusa's movement as she's sitting here on the chair talking on the phone, along with all the other things we already talked about in the scene. As she comes forward here, if you're just watching the head, kind of coming into this position and then coming forward, you can see that roll or that arc is put into that spine here. And then as he finishes this, he's creating a nice roll here as well. It doesn't just go straight back in that robot way, it's arcing back and down into this. And then as he comes forward, you're getting something like that into the motion. All of these things are building on top of each other, just reinforcing those mechanics. So what do you think? Should we stop there? All right, as a bonus, especially for animators that have a little bit more experience, maybe you've been a student for a while, or you're kind of like entry level trying to work your way up, I'll share one more big insight. Some might call this by some other name or refer to it in other principles, but I like to call it flowing action. When you look at great animations, you'll see that each separate action or each like major key pose, even though it holds, it never feels like it's holding too long, right? Or that the character has kind of stopped completely and there's this lull in the action. Each action flows into the next. So just as one kind of pose is just finishing the settling hold, it kind of picks up and takes off somewhere else. It's kind of like when you listen to a song and the song doesn't stop when you hit, when a specific beat kind of hits. It flows from that certain beat to another certain beat until the song is done, right? Otherwise, it'd be like boom, boom, pause, boom, boom, pause. It would feel very, boring because of that. The music might slow down, it might speed up, but it never stops. And that's the same thing that your animation should be doing. This awesome flowing action here. Woody brings up the toilet paper, and Even with just this little move, brings the hands down, you know, and the hands are flattening out that paper, and they're just about stopped. Then they start to rotate down, and the body comes right up, and he plants that leg. So a beautiful blending of the two actions, the hands flattening out the paper, and then that just about stopping, and then Woody rising up and putting his foot up on the lid. And this shot just has great flowing action throughout the whole sequence. Like in this section here, how this foot just starts to slip. So you go out of that hold just after everything is finishing. You go out of that hold and the foot slips, and then he's into this next move, right? It's got nice spacing. It's got a nice head arc where the body all connected. The arm follows through, goes into that windmill action. He just starts to like slow down a little bit here, and then catches himself again. And then as this finishes here with that settle where there's just a little bit of shake in the head and some residual movement in the body and hat, he does another hat flick and brings the hat up and over onto his head. With this same Medusa shot, there's still more. So like right here, as Medusa goes back and these legs kick up, right? It becomes a very leg action with the kicking and the laughing, just through this sequence. And then as these legs finish and they come down, they start slowing down, then it becomes a hand action as this starts to hold and this starts to take over. So those two actions blend very nicely together, creates a very smooth piece of visual music that just flows right from one hold to the next. And so here you've got that next hold, and then let's see what happens. So the hand motion is starting to die off. She's processing what's happening. So just as the hand motion dies off here and the camera cut happens, the face starts to blink and react to what's happening. Then you get that hand movement coming down, and you start the next chain of events for your character. As Mother Gothel darts across to the other side of the wall here, slides up it, and then drops down for that that connected. As Mother Gothel here slides over to this wall, going up it and then settling, you know, not only does she have this rolling spine here as that head goes up, you know, it's a nice swooping arc. And the hips settle as she slides down here, going into a nice hold. Just as the body stops to move, the eyes look over to continue the motion. Right, as the body is barely moving, kind of like a little earring stuff there, and then she starts to take off into her next move. Just as those eyes start to almost freeze, she blinks, and then she, you know, lifts this arm going into the next action, putting her hand on the wall, kicking this hip out, which is an anticipation to slam it against the wall, right? So it's a nice continuation of the action, and if you play it all out, you can feel how smooth that is. Very clean beats, even though there's a lot of holds in there between the body, the eyes, and then continuing to the next action. So if you feel like your mechanics are in a decent spot and you're looking to level up, this might be the thing, you know, that you need to throw in there to take it to a higher level. All you have to do really is watch your animation, see if every time you hit a key pose, if there's like that stop of the music, right? And then you go and hit the next pose, and then the next pose, and it really feels like it's two pose to pose, and it's not really hidden, blended together nicely. That's when you'll know that this will be a good upgrade for you to focus on. All right, now leveling up your mechanics to a higher level should be much clearer. By looking at these great shots, you discovered a lot of different clues on how to make your characters move more believably, right? We're talking about holds and settles, strong spacing, a connected body, a more connected body, rolling spine movements, and flowing action. There's so much more too that we could cover. But if you're thinking about adding in all these different body mechanics, insights into your animation right now, and it's kind of freaking you out, making you feel overwhelmed, remember that you don't have to add all of it. The quality of your animation doesn't have to match these master level shots, and it shouldn't. They've got way more experience than you. But that, these upgrades can still get you hired. And that's really the goal, is just to level up your mechanics a bit more. If all you do is you just plus your shot by adding one of these things that you didn't know about or focus on, like a rolling spine, it can have a huge impact on the body mechanics that you do and eventually the acting that you do. And the more practice that you put in with that skill, the better you're going to get at it, right? The quicker you'll be able to truly make amazing demo reel shots. And, the quicker you're going to be able to one day make shots that we frame by frame and really study, because it's like jaw-dropping, when you're working at Pixar or Disney or wherever it's going to be. What else did you learn? You discovered when you frame by frame a great animation, how to pinpoint those clues and look for different things that can help you level up your own shots, which I recommend that you do consistently as you're a student, to find new clues to creating those great animations. So if you see a animation that impresses you, take time to frame by frame it. Then try to emulate one thing from that. And once you've done that, come back, compare your animation to that example, see how you're stacking up, and then maybe take another swing at it or try something else. On a higher level, you also discovered how important a role body mechanics plays in acting shots, right? That body mechanics isn't just for epic action fight scenes. So if you're animating an acting piece right now and you're struggling like hell to move characters around believably, it may be time to step back, level up those mechanics a bit more, then come back and impress the world. My question for you now is, did you enjoy this? Did you find it helpful? If you did, then subscribe and ring the bell if you want to see more videos and tutorials like this in the future. And if you feel like you're stuck, if you feel like you didn't get answers to something that's really crippling you right now, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you're going through, so maybe we can make more videos and tutorials that help out with that specific thing. And until next time, as you're working on these mechanics, getting better, happy animating. All right, have fun.